Virgin Whitaker stood on the edge of his porch as the morning sun began to trickle through the dense forest canopy above. The sound of falling water could be heard from the creek that was running behind the cabin. In the distance, his keen gaze followed a flat-bottomed boat as it floated down the mighty French Broad River. The morning was calm and the air was still as a Civil War veteran reflected on how much life had changed the past several years. Somehow, he had survived the bloody conflict and returned home to his beloved homeland, North Carolina, where he had purchased 40 acres that lay in the shadow of the Little Pisgah Mountain. He had spent the past few years clearing the land for his crops and hewing the logs for his new cabin that he had built with his own 2 hands. And now here it was. His kingdom was fenced in by a chestnut rail fence, like folded protective hands that wrapped around his castle. Bergen had even built an extra-large bedroom and filled the home with nice furniture, just the way his wife Lizzy had asked him to do. Just then, a small change appeared on his hardened face, almost a smile. But it was always that way whenever he thought of Lizzy, the love of his life. They had grown up together as youngins. He was a strong mountain boy, and she was a pretty, buxom mountain girl. Their farms even adjoined one another, only separated by the Laurel Creek that ran through it. Together, they had spent countless days swimming and fishing in that creek during their youth, and now to think that it ran behind their little cabin, and Virgin and Lily's own 4 kids played in that same creek. Indeed, life had come full circle, and this morning Virgin stood on his porch, thanking the good Lord above for his generous blessings. Just then, Lizzy stepped on the porch and joined her husband. She had just finished up the morning's dishes and was still wearing her apron. Truth be told, Lizzy was always wearing it. She was a hard-working woman, always full of energy, and kept a spotless house, and even helped out with the farm work. By all accounts, she was a good wife and mother. She always made do with what she had, and she wasn't the type to ever complain. She knew that money was hard to come by, especially since there weren't any paying jobs in the area, and mountain folks had to provide for their own existence in every way. Yet, Lizzy always went beyond that, especially when it came to making clothes for her children, and work clothes for her husband, and dresses for herself. For every bit of skill that her husband possessed with his tools, Lizzy possessed the same skill when it came to a needle and thread. Oh, she was a master at sewing. You might even say an artist. She made beautiful dresses for her daughters and perfectly stitched shirts for her boys. Lizzy had learned how to sew as a little girl by helping her grandmother, and her prized possession was the little sewing box that contained her grandma's scissors, pins, and needles. However, lately, Lizzy's mind had been constantly occupied by something she heard down at the Primitive Baptist Church over on Davies Branch last month. All the women folk had gathered there one morning for a quilting bee. That's when Sally Ann made a comment about how fast Lizzy was working with her needle. And suddenly, Thelma started talking about a strange contraption that she had saw down in Edneyville that day she rode to the farmer's market with her husband. "Why, I declare, it was the most amazing thing anyone ever seen," Thelma began. "There was a salesman who had this machine in the back of his wagon. Something from the future, I tell you. It must have been. It did all the stitching for you, and it was so fast your eyes couldn't keep up with it. And they even had a man working the machine, just to prove how easy it was." "Oh, that's hogwash," Sally Ann retorted. "You know darn well, ain't nary a man alive that knows how to make any clothes. I tell you, if they had to make their own, they'd still be running around, nearly naked, with bear skins on them, like they did in the caveman days, before all the women folk got tired of looking at them and finally made some clothes for them." All the women laughed, but curiosity was written all over Lizzy's face, and she finally couldn't help herself. She spoke up. "Well, what was it, Thelma? What did they call it?" "Well, I don't rightly know. I couldn't get a real good look at it. on account of so many folks a pushing and a shoving, trying to get a look-see. But I heard a salesman say it was a brand new invention that he called a stitching machine. But just as soon as he said that, all the menfolk began to laugh. They all said that they had stitching machines at home that could cook cornbread too. Well, anyway, ever since that quilting bee, Lizzy couldn't get Thelma's words out of her mind. She even began to have dreams about this magical machine, even if she didn't know what it looked like or how it worked. But the mere thought of it just mesmerized her. She dreamed of all the clothes that she'd be able to make for her family, and it would save time too, she thought. Yet the machine only lived in her imagination until 3 days ago when she was gathering eggs. Just then, she heard some horses' hooves coming up the path on Wolf Pen Gap. Within a few minutes, a wagon came into view and pulled into the yard, just as a city fella all slicked up hopped out. "Howdy, ma'am. Is your husband home?" "Well, no, sir. He's out in the field with his mule. I'm afraid he won't be back for some time." "Well, that's quite all right, ma'am. I'll be on my way then." But just then he paused for a moment as another thought came across his mind. "Say, miss, if you don't mind me saying, that dress you're wearing, it doesn't look like a store-bought dress to me. Now, don't get me wrong. It looks good, but it looks like you might have made it yourself. I can't imagine how many days it took you to make it. Now, what if I were to tell you that I could have made that same dress in less than half an hour?" "Well, that's impossible, stranger. You see, I've been making clothes long enough to know when a stranger's telling the truth or spinning a yarn." "Now, miss, I'm not kidding. It's the gospel truth, the wonder of all wonders, I tell you. Come and have a look-see for yourself." Just then, the stranger stepped to the back of the wagon. There before Lizzy's eyes was the machine that Thelma had told her about. It was the most complex piece of machinery that Lizzy had ever seen in her life. "Is this the machine that I heard about in Eddyville last month?" "Right you are, ma'am. Now let me demonstrate for you how easy it is to operate." With that, the salesman hopped in the back of the wagon, took a seat right behind the machine, and put his foot on the pedal. And without nary a needle in his hand, he set about to work. And within 5 minutes, he had made a bonnet, with lace and all. It was unbelievable. Lizzy stood astonished as he climbed down and handed the bonnet to her. "Well, here you go, ma'am. You can have it as a gift. And here's my card. I'll be back this way in a few days. You can let me know if your husband's interested. Much obliged for your time, but I'll be traveling on now." The machine was everything that Lizzy had imagined it would be, and more. And suddenly, she had never wanted anything in this world more, and she wanted it bad for her family. "Excuse me, but before you go, can I ask how much it cost?" "A machine like this is worth its weight in gold to your family, ma'am. But you can have it for the unheard of low price for only $40. He tipped his hat, and within a few moments, he was on his way down the road. Yet, Lizzy's heart sank. There was no way that machine would ever be hers, since $40 was an absolute fortune. No one had that kind of money. The war between the states had left the entire county penniless, and all the banks had closed. Back in the present, Lizzy stood on the porch next to her husband. She had wrestled back and forth in her mind over the past few days, trying to summon the courage to tell him about the stitching machine that her heart desired more than anything. Yet she hadn't had the bravery to do so. But today was a day that the salesman would be back through. It was now or never. Now, it would be okay if he said no, but she wouldn't be able to live with herself if she didn't at least ask. However, little did she know, but Lizzy's entire life hinged on what would happen next. The Appalachian Storyteller is viewer supported. Thank you for your support. So it was in August of 1874. A traveling salesman had been up and down the hills and hollers of Henderson County, North Carolina, trying to sell the latest and greatest piece of technology ever heard of, something called a stitching machine. Yet, every single man had laughed in his face and scoffed at the staggering price of $40. That is, until Lizzy Whitaker summoned the courage on the front porch one morning to ask her husband to buy it for her. It was actually for the whole family, she argued, and after some time and considerable thought, Virgin Whitaker went to the richest man in the county, and he mortgaged 20 acres of his farm at $2 an acre to buy Lizzy her sewing machine. Wagon tongue spread the news up and down Bear Wallow, Bat Cave, Lookout Point, and even as far away as Hendersonville, as folks flocked to the Whitaker farm to see Lizzy sew on that incredible machine. I tell you, just like Picasso and his paintbrush, Lizzy worked magic with her hands and her feet at the same time, creating dresses and work clothes and pillowcases and bed sheets and curtains and everything imaginable. Women began flocking to her, bringing scraps of fabric that Lizzy would turn into beautiful clothing for their babies. She became a legend for owning the first sewing machine in this part of America. As for her husband's land, well, when time came for him to pay the money back, no, that was impossible. There was no way to ever come up with $40 back in those days. So he lost the 20 acres. But to him, it was a small price to pay for the woman that he loved more than life itself. Lizzy spent the rest of her life sewing for all her friends, neighbors, and even strangers. And she never charged a single penny. Every piece of cloth was stitched with love and care. One beautiful August day in 1912, Lizzy Freeman Whitaker passed away from this world, and folks in Henderson County said there was nary ever a funeral that was as well attended as hers. Men, folks, and boys alike came from everywhere, wearing shirts that Lizzy had made for them. Women and little girls were wearing beautiful dresses and bonnets that she'd made for them too. She had changed her entire community, one stitch at a time. And after she was laid to rest, sadly, her beloved sewing machine was used as payment to pay Jerry Stepp, the first funeral director in Henderson County, North Carolina, for the cost of Lizzy's burial. But I like to think that Lizzy's still up there somewhere now, sewing beautiful garments of white for all the angels of heaven.